2025 has been one hell of a year for great video games already, defined by the likes of Claire Obscure, Expedition 33, Split Fiction, Death Stranding 2, Donkey Kong Bonanza, and Hollow Knight Silksong, and that's just naming a few. But fortunately for us, if you're a fan of great video games, it seems like 2026 has already shown resoundingly clear that it is not to be upstaged by 2025. In fact, it very well may even top the incredible slate of games we've had this year. Even beyond the big one that just about everybody and their mother will be playing come next May, of course GTA 6, the entire year is packed to the gills with fantastic looking games that span pretty much every genre. From long-awaited franchise sequels to entirely new IP, you want to keep your eyes on these ones. I'm Jess from What Culture, and here are the 20 most anticipated video games of 2026. Resident Evil Requiem. Capcom's follow-up to Resident Evil Village is due out on February 27 of next year. It introduces players to a new protagonist, FBI agent Grace Ashcroft, the daughter of Alyssa Ashcroft, who was a playable character in 2003's Resident Evil Outbreak. Grace will investigate a host of deaths at Raccoon City's Wrenwood Hotel, where her mother died years prior. Here she'll find herself pursued by a relentless, terrifying stalker, not unlike Mr. X or Lady Dimitrescu from earlier Resi games. The big gameplay change up this time, however, is that players will be able to freely swap between first and third person perspectives, rather than being forced to play in first person as in the two previous games. There's still a lot we don't know about Requiem, but the tease of being able to explore a post-apocalyptic Raccoon City and rumors about Leon Kennedy being a second playable character definitely has kept fans talking. Considering how successfully the franchise has been revitalized since Resident Evil 7, it's pretty easy to have full faith in Capcom here, so we're absolutely looking forward to that one. 007 First Light. To keep 007 fans busy until the Denis Villeneuve-directed next Bond film comes out, there's 007 First Light, due out March 27 of next year. This one's a new origin story for the legendary super spy, and it's coming from Hitman developers IO Interactive. Entirely divorced from any cinematic iteration of James Bond that we've seen before, what we're dealing with here is a 26-year-old James Bond who's yet to become the iconic 007 and is in fact dealing with one of his earlier MI6 missions that's due to get him 00 status. Irish actor Patrick Gibson has been cast in the role of Bond, and while IO has stated the game will offer an updated depiction of Bond, you can still expect to see most of his usual Bond hallmarks. Namely, gear up for gadgets galore, awesome cars, globe-trotting action, and supporting appearances from the likes of M, Q, and Miss Moneypenny. The gameplay will offer up a mix of Hitman-esque stealth with gunplay and car chases, all of which will be wrapped up in a glossy cinematic bow. IO also has plans for it to launch a trilogy of James Bond games, so here's hoping that comes to pass. Crimson Desert. Crimson Desert, due out on March 19, was originally conceived as a prequel to the hugely popular MMORPG Black Desert Online, but developer Pearl Abyss ultimately decided to transition it to a standalone single-player RPG that just so happens to exist within the same universe. Crimson Desert takes place on the vast continent of Pywell, where mercenary protagonist Cliff attempts to rebuild his fallen fellowship known as the Greymanes and reclaim his homeland from those who've taken it. Now, it's super hard for a game to stand out in a genre this crowded, but Crimson Desert looks pretty darn interesting. In large part, this is due to the densely packed, beautiful open world, as well as the dynamic combat, and there seems to be a bunch of different traversal options. In the vein of Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, players are free to climb pretty much anywhere that they can see, and if that's not good enough, you can also just hop on a dragon and fly there. While it is arriving with considerably less hype than a lot of the games on this list, don't be surprised if this one ends up being a sleeper hit for 2026. The Dusk Bloods. When Nintendo fully revealed the Nintendo Switch 2 back in April, they shocked the world by also announcing that FromSoft and director Hidetaka Miyazaki were developing a new action RPG exclusive to the platform. What further distinguishes the Dusk Bloods, however, is that it is a multiplayer game that supports up to 8 players, each of whom chooses a vampire-like character to partake in both PvP and PvE combat. Considering it's rocking the same Victorian-era Gothic-type aesthetic, when the trailer for this one initially dropped, a lot of people mistook it for Bloodborne 2, which left a lot of people kind of disappointed. But hopefully this one will make them feel good when it finally comes out, if they have a Switch 2. The spiritual successor label for this one definitely fits then, even if the multiplayer aspect seems to follow in the footsteps of the studio's more recent Elden Ring Night Reign. Miyazaki has assured fans, though, that From Software has not abandoned their single-player roots, and we shouldn't expect an explicit multiplayer focus in all of the studio's future titles. Needless to say, if this one ends up being anywhere near as good as it looks like it really could be, a lot of people might be buying Switch 2 consoles next year. Pokémon Champions. If Pokémon Legends ZA somehow isn't enough to keep you busy for the foreseeable future, next year there's going to be Pokémon Champions, a PvP-centric turn-based strategy game with a focus on competitive multiplayer Pokémon battles. The gameplay of this one has been likened to the Pokémon Stadium games, and seeing as I am a person who somehow didn't play any mainline Pokémon game but I love Pokémon Stadium, that is music to my ears. It's also going to be compatible with Pokémon Home and Pokémon Scarlet and Violet, while also offering cross-platform play across Switch consoles and mobile devices. Given that Champions will replace Scarlet and Violet at next year's Pokémon World Championships, the Pokémon Company is definitely going all in on this one and fully expects it to be a global phenomenon. Considering it is a free-to-start game with a more content-rich paid version also being released, there's definitely huge potential for Champions to blow up in a massive way outside of the usual Pokemon fandom. Now, of course, that does also mean we need to cross our fingers hoping that the free version of the game is not paid for by a bunch of microtransaction slop that's going to destroy it if you don't have the paid version. So, again, fingers crossed, hopefully Nintendo get it right. Directive 8020. Directive 8020 is the latest entry into Supermassive Games' Dark Pictures anthology franchise. Though the series' first 4 games released annually, this will mark the first release in the anthology since 2022's The Devil in Me. This new installment is a sci-fi horror romp in which a colony ship crash lands on a planet where the surviving crew find themselves facing a shape-shifting alien threat. Lashana Lynch will be starring as astronaut and pilot Brianna Young, though of course, like previous Dark Pictures games, players will get to switch between 5 different characters throughout the cinematic story. While Directive 8020 mostly follows the formula you'd expect from other Dark Pictures games if you played any of them, this one does introduce some new mechanics, namely real-time combat and stealth, as well as an inventory system. But perhaps the most interesting new feature is the Turning Point system, which allows players to rewind gameplay to experiment with alternate paths, and it'll also be the first game in the series to include online co-op. Fable. The upcoming Fable reboot will be the first new mainline entry in the long-running franchise since Fable 3 came out in 2010, so to say a lot of people have been waiting on this one would be an understatement. Following the cancellation of co-op game Fable Legends in 2016, Microsoft announced a new single-player narrative title in 2020, which was being developed by Forza Horizon's Playground Games. Though this new game still transpires in the land of Albion, Playground intends to update the series' aesthetics and gameplay for modern tastes, alongside putting in a whole new story. While the specifics of the narrative and our protagonist are still very much unknown at this point, we do know that British actor-comedians Richard Ayoade and Matt King will be playing a supporting villain and mentor, respectively. The visuals and gameplay definitely look spectacular from what we've seen so far, so hopefully this is going to be a case where Playground is able to lovingly revive a series that's definitely been on ice for way too long. Pragmata. Though Capcom's new sci-fi action-adventure game Pragmata was first announced in 2020, years of delays and periods of radio silence led a lot of people to believe it had been quietly cancelled. Thankfully, reports of its death were greatly exaggerated as Capcom reintroduced the game this past summer, and it was even playable at Summer Games Fest. Pragmata takes place on a lunar research station, where stranded astronaut Hugh teams up with an android, Diana, to escape back to Earth while fending off the hostile AI robots which populate the station. What's fascinating about Pragmata is that players will be able to control Hugh and Diana at the same time. You'll need to complete puzzles as Diana to hack each robot's armor, all while dodging attacks as Hugh, then finally using Hugh to shoot the robot once Diana has hacked them. It certainly does look like a breath of fresh air for the surrogate parent action game subgenre. And even if it's only half as good as it looks, expect a bunch of other games to try and clone what this one's doing in the years to come. Nioh 3. Perhaps a few years later than fans were hoping for, Team Ninja is back with the third entry into their beloved tough-as-nails action RPG franchise, Nioh. Players will take control of a samurai called Tokugawa Takechio, as he battles supernatural entities and ascends to the role of shogun, all while coming into conflict with his corrupted brother. Nioh 3's story will see Takechio venture across Japan, transcend time, and meet figures from the nation's rich history. And it's also going to be shaking up the core gameplay in a few meaningful ways in the process. For one, the threequel will introduce a more accessible ninja playstyle alongside the traditional samurai one, with an emphasis on evasion and both aerial and ranged attacks. Beyond this, Nioh 3 will also be less linear than previous games in the franchise, with more wide open spaces for players to explore. While these changes likely won't please every Nioh fan, especially the diehard set, they may well open up the franchise to a wider player base, which is not necessarily a bad thing. High on Life 2. 2022's kooky sci-fi shooter High on Life definitely wasn't for everybody, but its irreverent Rick and Morty inspired tone nevertheless made it a breakout hit on both Steam and Xbox Game Pass. A sequel was unexpectedly announced this past summer, and now that game will be coming out on February 13 of 2026. We'll yet again see the bounty hunter protagonist setting out to keep his sister safe after a bounty is put on her head. Granted, the plot is expected to be relatively inconsequential, much like its predecessor, where it largely served as a vehicle for wacky humor and medium parodying set pieces. Rick and Morty's Justin Roiland won't be involved this time around after domestic violence charges were filed against him, but from what little we've seen so far, it does seem to retain that same off-the-wall tone and vibrant aesthetic of the predecessor. That said, naturally, High on Life 2 is really unlikely to be a hit with people that weren't a fan at all of the first game, but if you did like that one and enjoyed its humor, this one could well be for you as well. Squadron 42. Now, to be fair, nobody could really blame you for firmly disbelieving that Squadron 42 will actually make its recently announced 2026 release date. The single-player offshoot from long-gestating multiplayer space sim Star Citizen was announced alongside the main game in 2012, and some 13 years later, we are still waiting for it to materialize. While the main game is widely accused of suffering from scope creep to the point that some believe it's never going to release, at least Squadron 42 is a more contained campaign experience. And it's one which developer Cloud Imperium Games are adamant will definitely launch next year. The campaign will feature a combination of space combat and first-person shooter gameplay, with an absolutely stupendous star cast, including Gary Oldman, Mark Hamill, Gillian Anderson, Mark Strong, Andy Serkis, John Rhys-Davies, Henry Cavill, and Ben Mendelsohn, to name just a few. While it feels like there's just no way Squadron 42 can live up to the amount of hype that has followed it up until this point, hopefully what we'll see is at least an example of where all that time went. For the good, ideally. Subnautica 2. 2018's seafaring survival game Subnautica was a major breath of fresh air in the open world space, with its rich, teeming world to explore and, yes, how keenly it exploited our collective thalassophobia. Subnautica 2 seems to be offering more of the same, but well, more. It takes place on a new planet where players can explore a variety of biomes, discover new creatures, and navigate the depths with a new vehicle. A few big changes are coming though. For one, a mechanic cut from the original game where players can use alien DNA in order to modify their own abilities. Also, in a first for the series, co-op support is included for up to 4 players, adding a communal element to those very creepy dives down to the ocean deep. Though some pretty serious development hurdles have come to light in recent months surrounding this one coming to fruition, hopefully everything will come up swimmingly for Subnautica 2. Saros. Though most people expected Housemarque to follow up their phenomenally successful third-person shooter Returnal with a sequel, they instead decided to develop an entirely new IP with similar DNA, called Saros. Much like Returnal, Saros is a third-person sci-fi action game, but this time it takes place on a planet called Carcosa. It's here where protagonist Arjun Devraj, played by Mike Flanagan regular Rahul Kohli, investigates a lost off-world colony. Housemarque has called Saros an evolution of Returnal, mechanically speaking, and for those who found that game's roguelike gameplay a bit too punishing, Saros has been likened to more of a rogue light. This is because resources and progression will be consistent across runs, so it makes death just that bit less punishing. Still, it's reasonable to assume that Saros won't exactly be a walk in the park either, and from what we've seen so far, it absolutely looks to be channeling the tricky combat of its spiritual predecessor, while set in a gorgeously mysterious world powered by Unreal Engine 5. Onimusha: Way of the Sword. Onimusha fans have been waiting too damn long for a new game. They have in fact been waiting since 2006, when Onimusha: Dawn of Dreams was released. Fortunately, Capcom seems like they do indeed mean business with the upcoming Onimusha: Way of the Sword. More or less a franchise reboot, Way of the Sword follows samurai Miyamoto Musashi, whose likeness is modeled after legendary Japanese actor Toshiro Mifune, as he explores a twisted rendition of Kyoto during the Edo period. Herein, you'll be battling swordsmen and demons alike and harvesting their souls for your own gain. While the reveal trailer led many to assume that Capcom had gone the Souls-like route with Onimusha, the developer has clarified that while Way of the Sword features more patient and deliberate combat than in previous games, it's designed to be more accessible and less punishing than a Souls-like. Capcom has also confirmed that this one is due to be a more linear 20-hour experience, which, if you're coming off the back of somehow turning Ghost of Yotei into an 80-hour game like I just did, sounds pretty darn good. Forza Horizon 6. Though the Forza Motorsport series has seen better days, the Forza Horizon spin-off franchise just keeps going from strength to strength, with the widely lauded Forza Horizon 5 even marking the series' recent debut on PS5. And Microsoft just announced that Forza Horizon 6 is coming next year, with Playground granting the wish of many a fan by finally setting the game in Japan. As with prior games in the series, Horizon will eschew a one-to-one reproduction of the nation in favor of a scaled-down travelogue of iconic sites, with Tokyo and Mount Fuji already confirmed to feature. You probably know this if you happen to live in one of the cities they've done this to before. They did it with Australia in Forza Horizon 3, and wow, is that a jigsaw puzzle of what we have going on. Even still, the developer has stated that Horizon 6 does have the series' largest map to date, and will venture from packed city streets to spread out rural areas. It's reasonable to assume that Horizon's tried and true casual racing open world gameplay will stay fully intact here. Though it is launching exclusively on Xbox and PC to begin with, a PS5 release thereafter has already been confirmed. Marvel 1943: Rise of Hydra. The first of two Marvel games on this list now, with Marvel 1943: Rise of Hydra, which takes place in occupied Paris during World War II. This one revolves around Captain America and Black Panther reluctantly deciding to team up as they try and stop Hydra's bid for world domination. This third-person action game will allow players to control not only Cap and Black Panther, but also Howling Commandos team member Gabriel Jones and Nanali, the leader of the Wakandan spy network. While we haven't seen any honest-to-God gameplay yet, the cinematic trailer does confirm that Skydance New Media has nailed the blockbuster vibe that players would have expected, and gorgeously captured the aura of World War II-era Paris. Players can also expect a bunch of familiar Marvel faces. It's already been confirmed that Howard Stark will be in the game as an ally to Steve Rogers. With Uncharted creator Amy Hennig involved as both producer and co-writer, the odds are good that this one's going to deliver a spectacular rollercoaster ride accompanied by strong character development. Gears of War E-Day. The last mainline Gears of War game, Gears 5, released all the way back in 2019, so it's safe to say that fans are solidly overdue a new entry. Luckily, that new entry is not far off. Gears of War E-Day will be dropping next year. E-Day is a prequel set 14 years before the events of the original game, and will focus on Marcus and Dom as they fight to survive Emergence Day against the overwhelming Locust Horde. The game will take place in a new locale for the series, Kelowna, which was one of the first cities to fall to the Locust, and should ensure that E-Day is an unrelentingly intense thrill ride. Co-developer The Coalition has promised that the game will further flesh out the friendship between Marcus and Dom, while also delivering well-placed fan service, like revealing the origins of the series' most iconic weapon, the Lancer. After Gears of War used a relatively divisive open-world gameplay template, we're going back to the linear, tried-and-true format of the earlier games for E-Day, so generally fans are happy about that one. All the same, it's exciting to return to a franchise which so brilliantly reinvented the third-person shooter 20 years ago. Zero Parades for Dead Spies. Zero Parades for Dead Spies is the upcoming spiritual successor to Zaum's iconic 2019 RPG, Disco Elysium. While it does adopt the same art style and gameplay loop, this time we're trading cops for spies. Players will control Herschel Wilk, a spy who's haunted by a botched job 5 years prior, and who attempts to rebuild their network of comrades for a new mission. From what we've seen so far, Zero Parades looks every bit as dense, literary, and enchantingly weird as Disco Elysium. And though its predecessor casts a massive shadow of expectation as, well, I would say one of the greatest games ever made, it is easy to be optimistic about this follow-up. For anyone in the market for a thinking person's RPG that's by turns visceral, cerebral, and also bewilderingly funny, this should be just the ticket. If this isn't a major Game of the Year contender next year, then something will have gone horribly wrong. Marvel's Wolverine. Marvel's Wolverine was first announced more than 4 years ago, but following a devastating ransomware attack in December of 2023, developer Insomniac Games have kept their head down and only revealed the first gameplay this past month. But considering the enormous success that was Insomniac's Spider-Man games, there's no reason for us to expect that Wolverine will be any different. From what we've seen so far, this is every bit the visually stunning, fluidly cinematic superhero blockbuster that we would have hoped for. And another Aussie actor is following in Hugh Jackman's sizable shoes to play Wolverine. This time, it's Spartacus star Liam McIntyre. While narrative specifics are still up in the air, we do know that Wolverine will be a self-contained story within Insomniac's existing Marvel universe, and will feature prominent X-Men characters like Mystique and Omega Red. Anyone a little bit concerned that Insomniac may decide to sanitize Wolverine's tendency to get a little bit violent? Not to worry, the trailer shows this will be an absolute gore fest, so that's exciting. Grand Theft Auto 6. And of course, there's no way we're ending this list without mentioning the biggest game of next year, or arguably the decade. No matter what genre you tend toward, Grand Theft Auto 6 is unquestionably the most hotly anticipated game coming out right now in 2026 or pretty much any other year. Arriving almost 13 years after GTA 5, to call this sequel long-awaited is kind of an understatement. It's also pretty much guaranteed that the game is going to be one of the most commercially successful video games of all time. GTA 6 takes place in the Florida-esque city of Leonida, with a predominant focus on the legendary locale of Vice City, while revolving around a Bonnie and Clyde-like duo, Jason and Lucia. Luckily, the trailers so far indicate that Rockstar has been spending all of that development time wisely. This is easily one of the best looking games ever, and there's full confidence that its open world will be as jam-packed with quality content as anything else the developer has ever made. Needless to say, just about every other video game in development right now is keeping well away from GTA 6's release period. That's all the games we have on our list. If there's something you're looking forward to coming up on the horizon for 2026, do let us know in that comment box, especially if we didn't mention it in this list. If you're looking for more fun videos to watch, well, you're on What Culture Gaming. We got heaps of those for you. And speaking of games that are keeping well away from GTA 6, we made a video just summing up all of those games that really desperately need to stay away from that release window. So check that one out if you like. Otherwise, we got loads of other great lists for you on site and on YouTube, so stay tuned. I'll see you again soon.